Today, we're jumping into the story of a man named Nehemiah. Now, this is an ancient account, but you're going to see it's surprisingly relevant. It's really a masterclass in leadership, patriotism, and how one person's deep conviction can literally rebuild a nation from the ground up. So let's get into it.
Think about it. We talk with our friends, our family, our coworkers all the time. But what do you call a conversation with God? Well, the simple answer, of course, is prayer. And prayer is the absolute starting point for this entire story. A single prayer that began with one man and ended up changing the entire fate of a city. So here's how we're going to break down Nehemiah's incredible journey. We'll start with his life as a trusted confidant in a massive foreign empire. Then we'll see how some devastating news from his homeland sparks this incredibly powerful prayer, which completely shapes how he sees his nation's problems, and then finally launches him into decisive, world-changing action. Okay, so first things first. Who exactly was this guy Nehemiah? Because to really get the scale of what he's about to do, you first have to understand the world he was living in. And believe me, his job title alone tells you he was no ordinary person.
Nehemiah was the king's royal cupbearer. Now, this was so much more than just pouring drinks. In an age filled with assassination plots, the cupbearer's main job was to taste the king's wine first to make sure it wasn't poisoned. I mean, think about that. You don't give this job to just anybody. You give it to the person you literally trust with your life. This was a position of insane influence and security right at the heart of the empire.
And the empire he served? It was just staggering. The Persian Empire was the global superpower of its day, spanning 127 provinces from India all the way to Ethiopia. It was incredibly wealthy, sophisticated. It even had the world's first postal service. So Nehemiah wasn't just some guy on the fringes. He was living a life of total comfort and privilege at the very center of it all. But here's the twist in the story. Nehemiah wasn't actually Persian. He was a Jew. His grandparents, or maybe his great-grandparents, had been forcibly dragged from their homeland of Judah decades earlier when their nation was conquered. So even though he had this top-tier job, he was still part of a conquered people, an exile, living hundreds of miles from his ancestral home. And Nehemiah's comfortable, predictable life was about to be completely turned upside down by a single conversation. Because even with all his success in Persia, he never forgot where he came from, and he was just desperate for news about his home city, Jerusalem. When that news finally arrived, it was absolutely devastating. He was told that the people who had survived back in his homeland were in great trouble and disgrace. And even worse, the protective wall around Jerusalem, the very symbol of the city's safety and identity, was still a pile of rubble, and its gates were nothing but charred ruins. His reaction really tells you everything you need to know. For him, this wasn't just some sad headline from a faraway place. It was a deep, personal gut punch. He didn't just feel bad about it. The text says he literally sat down on the spot and wept. He mourned for days. He fasted. And then he took all of that pain, all of that grief, and he channeled it into prayer. But this wasn't just some desperate, "Oh God, please help" kind of cry. Nehemiah's prayer was incredibly thoughtful. It was structured. And when you look at it closely, it reveals so much about why his faith was so effective. He kicks it off by praising God's power and faithfulness. But then he does something really remarkable. He confesses the sins of his people, the very actions that got them exiled in the first place, as if he himself had committed them. And finally, he basically asks God to remember his own promise to bring his people back home. It's this beautiful mix of praise, confession, and calling on God's promises. I mean, this right here is the heart of it. Nehemiah was born long after the exile began. He wasn't personally responsible for any of it, but he didn't distance himself. He said, "I confess the sins we, Israelites, including myself and my father's family, have committed." He took complete personal ownership of a national problem. And, this sense of shared responsibility, that's what turns a general concern into powerful, world-changing action. For Nehemiah, the broken state of his nation wasn't some abstract issue. It was a personal wound. The source material we're looking at really challenges us to see our own broken walls through Nehemiah's eyes. Whether it's the societal stress from things like low birth rates, or deep political division, or tragically high suicide rates, or even a damaged public trust in our institutions. Do we see those things as someone else's problem, or do they genuinely break our hearts? And that's really the central lesson from Nehemiah's grief.
True patriotism, or even just true community concern, it isn't about pointing fingers. It's about feeling the pain of your people's struggles as if they were your own and carrying that burden personally. Now, for Nehemiah, carrying that burden didn't just end with a prayer. No way. Prayer was the beginning. It was the fuel that prepared him for what was probably one of the boldest moves of his entire life. And this wasn't some rash, emotional decision. For 4 solid months, Nehemiah prayed. He mourned, he fasted, he started forming a plan, and he waited for just the right moment. His action wasn't driven by impulse. It was soaked in preparation and patience. I mean, really, think about the sacrifice this was going to involve. He was about to ask the king to let him walk away from a life of incredible wealth, security, and influence. And for what? To become the unpaid governor of a broken-down, dangerous territory, tasked with an exhausting, seemingly impossible rebuilding project. He was choosing between comfort and his calling. So after those 4 months of praying and planning, Nehemiah finally goes to the king. And his incredibly bold request is met with unbelievable favor. The king doesn't just say yes. He gives him an official escort, letters of safe passage, and even provides timber from the royal forest to get the project started. And so Nehemiah's story really leaves us with this powerful question. It's not just about ancient history, it's about our own lives, right here, right now. When you look at your community, your nation, your world, what is the broken wall that truly breaks your heart? And what just might happen if that heartbreak, like Nehemiah's, became the starting point for prayer and for action?